Let's consider the ways in which we can improve usability of content in Confluence. First, as we discussed in the previous segment, we should keep the content layout consistent throughout. Content should be separated using sections so that users don't get faced with tons and tons of text. And if you do have a lot of text on a page, you should definitely use the table of contents macro and the anchor macro to jump to sections of text. You should also consider using descriptive text. So instead of linked text that reads, "Read more," you should add text that's descriptive, such as, "For more information on available parameters, see the value reference guide." Let's look at this in action. In this demo, we'll focus on layout techniques for different types of content.
In this demonstration, we're looking at the role of layouts in supporting different types of content. First, let's look at the layout for the home page for a documentation space. Here's Atlassian's Confluence documentation. On the home page, we can jump to the detailed documentation, for example, spaces. On this level, you have another standardized layout for documentation. Here, you can see that we have the content on the left, and in here on the right, under On This Page, we're using table of content macros to jump to the section headers in this page. Then there's content relating to spaces under In This Section, and then under that, related content. Both of these menus can be built using the Content by Labels macro that we've already looked at in this course. Now, if you click on the Customize Your Space link in the right-hand area, you'll see that the page has exactly the same layout, so the consumer knows what to expect when they navigate the content. Of course, you can create a template for this to ensure that you have a standardized layout for the page type to help people creating documentation and to ensure standardization and consistency across the content that's produced. There's also a consistent approach to naming links. There's a link to the Atlassian Marketplace in the page content. Instead of using Read More or Click Here, Atlassian have used descriptive text so that the consumer of the information can be completely clear on where the link will take them to. Here is an example of documentation for a Confluence app, Kamala Workflows. Here we've used macros to help navigate through this content. There is plenty of content here, and this is the standardized page layout for documentation that explains macro usage. Each of these pages shares the same layout. At the top here, we're using the Table of Contents macro to automatically generate a list of links to headers in the page. We've used it to build out a horizontal menu. We've used this option rather than the standard list of links to page headers because it takes up less screen real estate. Let's look at the settings we've used for this macro. We've selected the layout option flat here, and in the separated text field we've added pipe to get the automatically generated line between links. We've set the minimum and the maximum heading to level 2, as we only want heading level 2s to generate this menu. We've also excluded the overview heading by adding that here in the Exclude Headings text field. Let's look at this in action. If I click the example link, I get sent down to the example section in this page without having to scroll. What if I also wanted to add in a link to navigate back to the top of the page rather than scrolling each time? You can use the anchored link. Here, at the top of the page, I'll add in an anchor so that we can link from there to sections in the page. I'll type the curly brace for shortcut for inserting macros into a page. Type in ANCH, and then there's an anchor macro, so select that. Add in some text for this page, such as page_top, and click Insert. Now scroll down to the example section of the page, and underneath the code macro, add in this text, top of page. We need to link this to the macro that we just added to the top of the page. Select the text and then select the link icon from the page formatting tools at the top of the edit window. Select the advanced option in the left-hand section for this macro. Type in hashtag and then the name you gave your anchor. Now click Insert. The text is now linked to the anchor at the top of the page. Click Update to save your content and check to make sure that it worked. You could now copy and paste the link that you just created to all the sections in the page. One macro we haven't discussed that can be quite useful is the Related Labels macro. In this section of the page you can see that we've added a Content by Macro label. This builds out a nicely formatted list of links. Let's see how this is different to the Related Labels macro. I'll use the shortcut to add in the Related Labels macro underneath the Content by Labels macro. In the settings, type in the label Macro Approval. What this does is goes ahead and looks at the pages that have the label Macro Approval, and then builds a list of labels that have been added to pages that have the label Macro Approval. Let's see how this works. I'll select Save to save the macro settings, and then click Update to save the page edits. Now I move to all the examples sections of the page. Click on the Macro Workflow. You'll see here that we have all the content that has the label Macro Workflow added to it. This could be useful for directing users to similar content. Now we've seen how this works, I'm going to remove it for now because I think the links provided by the Content by Label macro are enough for our purposes. The Content by Label macro works better for us here because it generates a list of links that are nicely formatted, and you'll see that there's a bit of extra text explaining what's in the page. Let's look quickly about how this is set up. Double-click on the macro to open up the macro editing pop-up. Now click in the Show Options section, scroll down to Excerpt Display and select Simple. Let's use the preview function to see how that excerpt is generated. Exit the macro and save the page. I'll scroll down to all the examples section of the page and click on the first link that is auto-generated for us. In this case, it's the Adding Multiple Reviews page. Click Edit and you'll see the Excerpt menu at the top of the page, with the information of the page content added in it. You'll also notice that the excerpt is set to hidden, so consumers of the page aren't confused by the excerpt content. It just appears in the auto-generated list of links to pages that have the label specified by the Content Labels macro. In this demonstration, we were looking at layouts and built-in functionality that can make your content easy to consume. And that concludes this demonstration, where we looked at layouts and the built-in functionality that can make your content easy to consume.
Let's quickly review the takeaways from the Skill Builder so far. Use the built-in features of the application to help you produce content that has a similar look and feel. Use templates and blueprints for pages, and also use space templates. Use space settings to help you manage your content. When creating a space, remember that you can change the space name at a later stage, but not the space key. Use permissions to carefully control who can access your content. It's possible to allow public access to your content, but do so only after carefully considering the impacts. Next, we'll dive into using Confluence as a knowledge base along with Jira Service Desk.